Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. I'm Liz Hyman, and I'm here with your Sales SOS podcast crew. And today we're talking about sales skills. And before we go any further, for all of you who are on LinkedIn and those of you who are listening on the podcast, it is allergy season, so my voice is just a mess. So you are going to hear more from your crew than from me today. But today, what I want to start with is we're going to talk about selling skills. And let's just jump right in. Did we have a question already, though? Somebody said.
Nope, it just asked when we were starting, essentially.
We
And
are
we've started.
now. Thank you for your patience, anybody who's been waiting for us. Okay, so let's dive into our first session. Like I said, we're going to talk about sales skills. Hello, and welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. I'm Liz Hyman, your host, and I'm here with your Sales SOS podcast crew. And we're talking about sales skills, right? Sometimes we feel like our entire sales team is just broken. But in truth, a lot of times it's skills that we can help them gain and fix. So we're going to talk about some of the sales skills that are really important in the world today. And I think it's important to say that right now we're in another one of those really unpredictable times when people aren't sure what is happening and people are having a hard time making decisions and it's hard to get people's attention. And so I think it's really important that we talk about sales skills now, because every time we have a boom economy, people buy in spite of our sales team. And whenever we have a difficult economy or COVID or any other crazy thing happening, our sales skills for our team become incredibly important. So we're going to start by talking about getting people's attention, building credibility, and earning trust. And like I said, not going to talk a whole lot today. So who wants to kick this topic off? I think Bryn probably, because she really focuses with us on the top of the funnel in LinkedIn. But I think that the rest of our crew, especially Renee, are going to have some great things to share with you. So let's start by getting attention, building credibility, and earning trust.
Well, so I love that. And really, there are a couple things that you said in there. The earning trust, it's earning the right to get the sales conversation in the first place. Right? One of the biggest mistakes salespeople make is they connect and pitch, or they pitch before anyone even cares. I got an email today or a LinkedIn message today that started with 80% off. Of what? Like of what? So here's the challenge right now. The challenge is, how are we getting attention around what our buyers care about? We have to detach from what we want to tell them and attach to what they want to consume that doesn't lead with our solution, but leads to it. Right? We've got to be able to start the conversation, meet them where they're at. Ending with a preposition. I hate to do that, but right, like but meet them there. Meet them where they are today, right? So really important. So on LinkedIn, I have a 5-step-ish process. The first thing we have to do is resonate. And, when we built this 5-step process, actually, my brother, who's not in the business but is brilliant, we debated 1 and 2 back and forth for a long time, and I won. He's smarter than I am, so it was really fun. So the first one is resonate, and this is why it's first. There's so much noise that if I'm scrolling or I look at my message, the first thing I have to see is that this is for me. And so the resonate is leaders of manufacturing companies. That's me. I'm a leader of a manufacturing company. Or SaaS providers, or right, whatever it is. And we've got to resonate. It's like, if you see your name, you stop. The next level down is if you see your title or your industry, you stop. We have to resonate first. The second one is create curiosity. Once we've resonated, we've got to get them to lean in. And these were the 2 debates. Do we create curiosity and then resonate, or resonate and then create curiosity? And we've landed on resonate first. Creating curiosity could be 5 mistakes, and that sounds so cliche, but those are the things that drive people in. Or top tips from tips from the top CEOs in manufacturing, and you're like, I'm in manufacturing. I want to know what other CEOs are saying. Whatever that is, you've got to get that. That second piece is you've got to get them to lean in. Number 3, you have to teach them something new. If you don't teach them something new, there's no reason for them to ever care about what you have to say. You can verify that everything they're thinking is accurate, but you don't bring any additional value to the table. Why would they want a conversation with you?
Right.
But the next piece is another place where content or messaging drops off. And this is so important. So it was resonate, create curiosity. Number 3 was teach them something new. Number 4 is what they just learned needs to create a moment where they go, boy, I'm not doing that. Or how come my rep isn't talking about that? Or what they learned, they have to start thinking about their current situation differently. Otherwise, they could have had an aha moment, but if it doesn't resonate with them, if it doesn't connect with them, why would they want to talk to you? They have to be able to see what they just learned in their business. And number 5, all of that needs to create a compelling moment. We've got to move them from lurker to engager. We can't start a conversation till we know they're there. So whether it's a great CTA, or they're asking us to connect, or they accept our connection request, or they comment, or they react, we need to know that they're there in order to start that conversation. And that's where the trust and credibility begins.
So how do you do that though, Bren? Like how do you do all of those things? Are you sending emails? Are you posting? What are you doing?
Everything you do, like that has to fit your profile. That has to fit your content. That has to fit how you reframe a curated piece of content. Now, wait, let me be clear. Not all content has to do that. All sales content has to do that, right? You can have a content about an event. You can have pictures from a trade show. There's lots of other content out there. But if we're talking about content that converts to trust-based conversations without being pitchy, those are the 5 elements it needs to hit. Everywhere we're engaging, that we want to convert a consumer of our content to a trust-based conversation.
What do you think, Renee?
Wonderful advice that Bren is giving, 100%. But where I think I can add to the conversation right now is probably, I want to pick up on a thread how you introduced us. I call the way that you introduced it, like whether or not we're in a gift market. And that can be during crazy times, right? Like you can launch a company that has unique product, unique service, high demand, and you never really have to work for it. Or you can be a company that is more exposed to cyclical changes or things like that. And when you come out of a gift market is when I think all the things that aren't working well get really exposed, like way more than what you think is going to happen. So I think that's one big thing to kind of keep in mind is all of a sudden, if you are facing coming out of a gift market for whatever reason, then you have to really think about what's about to be exposed and where my weaknesses that kind of could be glossed over in a gift market, like where that is. And conversely, from the consumer side, so that's from like looking at, inward looking out, and then from the consumer side, from your buyer side, in times of high volatility, people tend to hit one extreme or the other of either a growth focused mindset or a risk reduction mindset. And understanding what could be driving someone into those two things in this high volatility is going to be, I believe, key to getting their attention. So if you come in focused on growth and all that the person you are trying to sell to is focused on is their CFO has told them to cut budget, like you're not even, it's just noise, not signal, right? So I think that is, it's another thing when it's not a gift market, when there's high volatility, when things are relatively even, we're more open, we're more receptive, we're more trying to look for other things. When we retreat to our corners, we really got to know what that corner is to be able to be the signal, not noise during that time.
Agreed. Chris, what do you have for us? Mike?
I always think that the key is to get the attention is always going to be relevance to start. How is it relevant to that person? And I think we've covered enough of the points around what's going to make that relevant to them. And then I think after you have that relevance, then you need to establish credibility. I don't think they care about credibility until they know that you solve a problem that they have or will potentially have in a way that they're not, ideally, that they're not currently considering, right? Because if you're every company has multiple vendors that are hitting them with these things. If they're hearing the same story from everybody else, there's no reason for them to go with somebody new when they've already got 7 vendors that are going to be there. But if you're pitching it differently, if you're coming in with something that's a unique value prop or a novel approach, you're going to get their attention. Doesn't necessarily mean they're always going to go with you, but they're going to have to consider it at that point. And if they go down that path and find that, no, that is how I want to go forward with this, because it is not the same thing that I hear from everybody else, then you're in the leader's spot for hopefully being able to drive that forward.
I think one of the things that we're running into right now, especially with everything that's been talked about so far, is how important the fundamentals are and just getting back to the fundamentals. Ask questions. And I know a little bit later we're going to get into asking questions, but if we ask questions and we don't make assumptions about what people are interested in, we'll actually get a little bit more information, and then we might be able to deliver something in the context of what's important to them, not what we think should be important to them. So get back to the fundamentals. And those fundamentals are the same things that we deeply care about as human beings. Am I making an impact? Am I valued? Do the people around me like and trust me? Am I going to make a mistake? What happens when I fail? Like, if I fail, can I recover from the failure? Like all of these things, these basic needs that we have, wants and needs that we have, are the things that I think have been highlighted here over the conversation. It's how do we get to those points? How do we create some messaging that resonates with folks, that allows them to kind of work through the framework that Bryn shared with us and move through those journeys and realize that when there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of extra stuff that's out there, complexity will kill your conversation, will kill your conversions, will kill the things that are in front of you. So simplify, identify next logical steps so that it's easy to take them. If you get back to the basics work, the fundamentals work. And if you want to get into really deep fundamentals that have stood the test of time, take a look at a good friend of mine, Todd Capone, and just look at what he shares out there from a sales historian perspective. One of my favorite quotes, there's nothing new except what has been forgotten. It's a Marie Antoinette quote.
And that is happening right now, right? With all these young people picking up old bad habits.
Whether bad habits or good habits. And that's what's cool about us as leaders. We're in a position where we can help them. We can help show the way and share things through conversations like the one that we're having here about what good looks like. Because there's a lot of bad. And I've never been fortunate enough to work inside one of those organizations where, what'd you say, Renee, you called it, I think, a gift market. I don't even know what a gift market is, but I would love to find one. Like, how do I find a gift market where people know the name of the company I'm with and know that they're problem aware and they're solution aware and they want to move things forward. Yeah.
You have to be really lucky to be Zoom during COVID, right? You You got to be in the right place with the right message at the right time. I want to back up for just a second. Renee, I know you've got something to say, but as I'm thinking about building messaging, and again, I apologize for my voice, everybody. There's a couple of things that are important. One is remembering that if you are in a business-to-business complex sale, you have many different buyers, and messaging to each of those buyers is different because their relationship to the problem is different, and what they need to achieve is different. So that's one thing that I think we need to remember as we're building out the things that Brent and Renee and Mike are talking about, and Chris. I think the second thing is, I like to think about having my clients say, "Can you do that for me?" Like Brent used some other words, like, "Why isn't my team doing that?" Or, "Oh, we never thought about it that way." And the next thing is, "Wait, hey, you company that are talking about this, can you do that for me?" And when we achieve that, that means we really do have their attention. And now it's a matter of, maintaining it and building the credibility. And the third thing that I want to bring up, and again, you guys have heard me say this a million times, but this is that what do salespeople need to be? They need to be curious, right? They need to be curious about their clients, just like we want our clients to be curious about us. We need to be compassionate. Regardless of the situation we're selling into, people have things going on, and we need to be compassionate about it. We need to be creative. We always need to be creative in our messaging and our engagement and our solutions. We need to be creative. And when we do that, when we do those things, we actually are building credibility, which is sort of the next piece of this. Okay, so I have gotten your attention. I hopefully built a little bit of credibility by talking about the things that you care about in a way that makes sense to you. How do I then build the credibility that I need to build in order for you to continue the conversation? And Renee, I cut you off. So if you wanted to jump in on
you're good. You didn't cut me off. I was leaning in to listen.
Okay. Wow. I love that. I love when she leans in to listen. My biggest fans, right? I love that we are all each other's biggest fans here in this room. Okay. So once we have gotten the conversation going, how do we build credibility?
Well, I'll start by saying you got to show up when you say you're going to show up. You've got to detach from what the prospect is worth to you and attach to what you are worth to the prospect. You have to have the right intentions. Your goal cannot be to make the sale. Your goal needs to be to solve the problem, right? All those things, you need integrity. And, you need a team that walks the walk. One of the things, every day I get a solicitation of people that want to prospect for me or use automation or cold call. And I say, if I need another way to grow my business when my business is about helping people grow their business on LinkedIn and I can't do it, I shouldn't be teaching it, right? Like no, I'm not going to do anything but this, because if this doesn't work, I shouldn't be doing this. So practice what you teach, practice what you preach, doing what you expect from others, and just ultimately being the best human being you can be, showing up with the best intentions.
So Brent, I want to challenge you. I want to challenge everybody sitting here, because one of the things that I keep hearing, or the things that I keep hearing, are these really manipulative, pushy, make you feel like an idiot. Why would you do anything else? I'm the smartest one out there. And if you're not working with me, then you're a fool. And, what you've been doing isn't working. You'd be stupid to keep doing it. Like, this is the messaging that's coming out right now. There's a lot of training that sounds like this. Hey, sorry, I only planned a half an hour to talk to you. I'm so cool. I got a client after this. Like, how do this new?
We have one seat left in our webinar. I go, what?
Look,
Like I have
we all
500
know that the high pressure stuff, maybe it works here and there, but you're not trying to build a relationship. It's like I had a former CEO who once came into a room and basically first time he wasn't CEO yet, but he was going to be. He said, "I can sell ice water to Eskimos." And I turned to my boss, who was the CRO, and I said, "Yeah, but you won't do it more than once." If you're looking to build relationships, those high pressure tactics and everything else, yeah, maybe you'll make that first deal, but you're not going to make any of the others. And bad news travels really fast, and we're super hyper connected compared to how we used to be. So if you think that other people aren't going to hear about that negative impression, you're just flat out wrong. Like they say, a satisfied person tells one person, a dissatisfied person tells 15, right? So, you might get away with it here and there, but the vast majority of the time, you're going to be wondering, it worked this one time. Why didn't it work these others? Yeah, because people figured you out.
Mike, what you got?
I don't know how much more I can add. I mean, basically, don't be a jerk. It's not about you. Here's the thing. I know of nobody who's made their number by buying from themselves. Right? I mean, like, come on.
Well, multi-level marketing companies.
Yeah. Okay. So there you go. So fortunately, actually, we've got a bunch of LuLaRoe stuff sitting in that closet from when we went
5
down
years
that.
ago.
I'm happy to talk about that kind of stuff. Like that's a good experience to share with a bunch of people about what not to do and how not to do any of this kind of stuff. But anyhow, you don't buy, or you don't make your number by buying from yourself. Your customer has a vote, and if you think you're going to strong arm them into a vote, maybe you're in the wrong business.
Waste management.
I'll just add, Bryn addressed this in her framework for LinkedIn specifically, but so when we're talking about building trust and credibility, I think we've covered a lot of, making sure that we're showing that we understand them, expressing some empathy, I think, particularly in high volatility times. And Liz, I think that's kind of what you're saying, that you're finding so repelling, particularly in this moment, about a lot of these high pressure tactics, is there's very little empathy in high pressure tactics.
There's zero.
Yeah.
There's zero.
So, or maybe you express it and then take it away with the high pressure tactic. But this is one of those times where it goes a lot further than in a normal time, right? Like, maybe I feel, when things are rolling good, I don't really need empathy for my situation right now or whatever. My situation could be, I know I need your product and my CFO won't approve any new budgets, and you really got to help me figure out how to get through the situation, right? Like, so I think that empathy is really big. I also think it's a time where, this is part of what Bryn touched on, new information is very important, not just for gaining attention, but also for building trust and credibility, right? So if you have good new information, and that new information may help me make an argument to my CFO, right? Like I'm not at the point where I'm willing to take it to my CFO now, but now I have something that I didn't have before, right? And I'm going to trust you if it's a credible piece of information, right? I'm going to transfer that credibility onto you because you gave it to me. So, these are things where, from a marketing perspective, I can say like audits and assessments and competitive information and things like that would be sort of classic sales enablement materials, are really good at helping, or should be really good. If you don't have them, then you should, particularly right now. And I don't use the shoulds a lot because that's a guilt word. But this is a time where you could start doing that. Really thinking about what you can arm your sales team with that will help them provide that new information that builds trust and credibility in the early part of a stage, not in the late part of the stage.
And I think if you lean into that a little bit more, the idea that right now with social media, CEOs are in a position where they're able to create content that builds trust for the company. And in a world where if people don't know you, then it's hard to get their attention. CEOs can help build that, so the salespeople can leverage it. Any last thoughts on this? Go ahead, Bryn.
I just want to say, so a friend of mine, Trisha Ben, who's the CEO of the C-Suite Network, whenever we have any kind of networking, only right before we'll go into a breakout or she'll say, just remember, should is a bad word. Don't should anyone. So don't should on anyone. That's it. Don't should on anyone. So I just wanted to share. I love what Renee said. Okay, that's all.
Any last thoughts, Chris?
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us for this episode of the Sales SOS podcast. We've really enjoyed having you here with us. We are going to go into our next session, and we're going to be talking about handling objections, because I think that there's some big objections right now. So we'll see you in the next episode. Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. I'm Liz Hyman, and I'm here with your Sales SOS podcast crew, Bryn Tillman, Chris Bowen, Mike Simmons, and Renee Bigelow. And today we're talking about sales skills. So whenever the sales landscape changes, the economy changes, things change, sales gets harder, right? And for some people it gets easier for, depending upon what they're selling. But when it's not a gift market, as Renee calls it, our team sales skills become that much more important. So right now we're in a very uncertain time. Things are very unpredictable, and people are thinking about a lot of different things. They're unsure about what they should be spending money on and when they should be spending it. So as salespeople, we need to overcome that. And we talk a lot about overcoming objections. I prefer handling objections. Objections are part of the sales process. Sometimes it's part of the sales process as the person who's buying says, this is not the right time or the right product for me. Sometimes an objection is, these are the things I'm worried about. So I have a process for handling objections, or overcoming objections, or however you want to talk about it. But I'd love to hear from you guys. You get your first objection when you do a cold call, which is, I'm busy. This isn't the right time. So let's start at the very top of the funnel. How do we handle objections?
I also think that piece of new information helps a lot, right? Because now it's not he said, or she said, right? It is, here is a new piece of information that changes perspective, right? So I have a lot of global clients. It's been a time of huge uncertainty, right, this year for a lot of reasons. And a lot of people decided to pull back, right? Oh, I'm going to hold off on a decision. Well, now there is a 90-day tariff window for many countries. It's a perfect example of saying, this was I'm just using something that's on top of everyone's mind today, right? This was your reason, high volatility for postponing something. It was your objection, right? You're gonna hold off on making a decision. Now we have a window to say, we can guarantee prices until this date. You need this new piece of information. This is the projected cost based on what we saw over the past few weeks of what it will be later. So here is an opportunity to put this new information in front of you for new consideration. It's different than how you formed your objection earlier, right? So, I mean, that's just an easy one right now to use as an example. I wish they were all so easy, because that also has urgency to it and, works in our favor. But I'll let somebody else come up with one of the more hard ones.
Well, I'm going to come up with a strategy or structure versus actual what to say. My whole philosophy is earning the right to get the conversation. So I'm not cold calling. I'm not getting on a call with someone until I've added enough value that they can't wait to talk to me. That's not right for everyone. Everyone has their own way of prospecting. But for me, that makes the most sense. I rarely get hung up on, never, but rarely. And most of my meetings are in Zoom because they're scheduled. So how do I get there, right? So there are silent objections that are happening all the way until I get to the first call. So I need to know what those are. So social listening, or listening period, is where we have to start. We have to really identify what are the real objections that our prospects are giving us. Because when I sit in a sales training that, someone's doing, and they'll go, oh, what are the objections? The price. Well, that's not the real objection. Like, what is happening that, take all of the obviousness out, and what's underlying. So we can't overcome it until we really know what it is. That's the first thing. The next thing we have to do is, I'm not going to go back to that, but the 5 points. Well, I will quickly, is you've got to resonate, create curiosity, teach them something new that gets them thinking differently about their current situation, and create a compelling moment. So your content needs to do that. Your messaging needs to do that. And I think that kind of feeds into what Renee's saying, is we've got to get their attention with a sense of urgency. But if the biggest objection is status quo, then you need content about, all the reasons status quo is going to get you in trouble. This is my big thing right now, is, I'm really out there teaching prompt writing to sales and marketing teams deeply. And they're like, oh, well, what we're doing works. Status quo is fine. So I'm not going to compete on price with status quo, because the price of status quo is cheaper than paying me, right? So what am I talking about? So I need to find out what matters to them. Losing the competitive edge, having your prospects start more trust-based conversations because they've got better content at scale. The lack of your ability to personalize fast enough. There are things, and what that outcome is that your prospect's going to get there first. And we know, Corporate Visions did a study, 74% of buyers choose the rep that was first to add value and insight. 3/4 of the decisions are made based on having value added to them. So I know you're talking about objections, but that content overcomes objections. And we actually have content all the way through the sales cycle. We know that the next call, we're going to get these objections. So we're going to send them content that overcomes it in preparation for that call. Right. And so at every point, we have to know really what the objection is. And now we have to earn the right to never hear that objection, because we've overcome it. And I'll tell you one more and then I'm done. But this is not exactly an objection, but it shows up like one. And this happened for years, where I would get a verbal. Yay! And then they'd say, Bryn, we'd like to talk to 2 or 3 customers before we sign. And I'd be like, oh, okay, well, that could take days or weeks or even longer sometimes. And it's putting my customers out just a little bit and all those things. And by the time I make the introductions and maybe they're responded to, even no matter how much my clients love me, they have their own life and their own business, that it cools down and the urgency to work with me is gone. So how do we overcome that objection early on? After my first call, I will say, Mike, so great to understand a little bit about what's going on in your organization. Thanks for kind of taking the time to listen to kind of some of the things that we might be able to help you with. Here's our next step. Before we meet, I'm going to ask you to just take a few minutes and look over the recommendations that I have on LinkedIn, because if we decide to move forward, there's a good chance you may want to talk to 1 or 2 of those. So can you commit to me to just kind of review those before our next call? Now they never say I want to talk to someone, because they just looked at 12 people that they can click through and go, oh, they're just like me and they love her. So like that's one way to overcome that objection, but it's not really an objection, but it's a block, right? Before it happens.
It is an objection. Those objections sound lots of different ways. And that's one objection is what they're saying is I'm still not 100% sure.
Even though
right?
I gave you a verbal.
Even though I gave you a verbal, I'm having some concerns about, are you really as good as you said you are? That's an objection.
Right.
And it's part of their buying process and it's okay. So how getting ahead of it matters. And it's one of the things, and Renee, you and I have talked about this a lot. How can the marketing team help salespeople know what objections they get all the time? How can the marketing team begin to put out content that supports the salespeople without having to like say, here's an objection, send it to the, like how do you build that so that support is already there?
So I will tell you, for quite some time, for as long as I've been in the business, that's been a real hard thing to get from sales often. Like you have to really do the work to get marketing into a meeting where the sales management schedules time and then everybody tells you all their objections. You got to get them down. You got to make sure you understand the complexity. Over time, we've moved into things, and some people like this, some people don't, but we've moved into things like sales recording, like sales call recordings, right? Or even more customer interviews, where we've done deep customer interviews, not just like the glossy questions, right? Where we've said, what were you considering before you purchased us? We've asked the things before they purchased too, right? Like, what were your objections when you were not sure? Like where we do that research with customers, or we have those sales calls that are recorded. So I'm going to give you a cheat sheet that bypasses a lot of what was a pain point in the past of really trying to understand those and get them into marketing. If you, as a sales leader, pull some of those that you think are very relevant, and if you can't do this, at least just allow your marketing team to have access, right? Like marketers will know what to do. But if you want to pull the ones that you think are great and send those over to marketing, they now have your customers' words, not even your salesperson's interpretation of those words, which is like a game of telephone, right? Where something gets lost in translation all along the way. Then they can use that in AI. I mean, you can also just use it yourself, right? Like without AI. But if you use several of them and you build them into a project in AI, now you can develop a lot of content with the help of AI that can just get into a big knowledge base. That's the big thing. You're using AI to help you with this large knowledge base of these exact way that they're saying things. So your marketing team can craft a message and then say to the AI, help me put this in the words. Have I addressed their objections? What am I missing? What am I like? Your marketing team can brainstorm with the AI like the customers in the room, essentially, and make sure that all of that's done. And that one thing could help you get a lot of sales enablement materials. And then you could say to your sales team, what is your process, right? Go back to your sales manager and say, what is your process? Are there follow-up calls? Are there emails? Are they doing LinkedIn? Whatever. And then make sure you have a playbook that matches to the format of the process. So you have that content that you're building it out of. You find out what the process is. You make sure you have materials that support the formats for that process. It may be sales scripts, right? Like it may be they're going to do, and I don't mean that you use them word for word. I mean, it's something that a salesperson can look at before they make a call to kind of do some context switching because they're doing a million things, right? And it helps them with that context switching to like refresh their brain. Like this is some of the points I can make when I'm on a call, right? So it may be that, it may be emails, it may be hard letters, like thank you notes or whatever, things that will help them just go through those steps faster and easier because we're all trying to do too many things at once. And that context switching all the time is heavy load. So that's what the sales enablement materials generally help with.
Mike, Chris, anything? They're very quiet.
Oh, I was just gonna let Mike go. But I mean, I always look at objections as mostly, not always, mostly as buying signals, right? So you have to help them be able to make the decision. It's a question. Either something ideally you would have found out during discovery or during that portion of your process, but you have to be able to understand where it's coming from, and then you have to get them comfortable with what the resolution of that is. I think once you can walk them down that path, it becomes a lot easier. Doesn't mean it's always done, because until there's ink on paper or DocuSign, it doesn't count. But that's how I tend to look at those things. I think you have to be able to meet them where they're at, not where you wish they were.
Mike, you have anything to add?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is going to be an oversimplification of objection handling and responding to objections, but just write these words down. Ask a question, then listen, hear what they have to share, then decide. Do I share information in response, or do I ask a follow-up question? If I ask a follow-up question, then listen, then decide, and then choose to go through it again. It's just a looping process, like really simple. Here's the problem. We overcomplicate that. Excuse me. I don't remember if we can curse or swear on this thing again, but we overcomplicate.
I don't know, but we always do, Mike.
Okay,
So
we overcomplicate the fuck out of this by going in and saying, here's my script. Here's my 10 ways to 10 questions to handle an objective or objection, or 10 whatever. You know what? Be a human being. Be curious. Ask your customer questions. We talked about credibility earlier. You gain more credibility in the questions you ask than the crap you share. So ask, listen, decide, then either share or ask. And just go through that process. If you do that, and you can steal it, run with it, make it your own, do whatever you want to do with it. Just do that. You'll get
Mike,
better.
what I want to do, I want to give you actually a process that I've been calling ask lately. It's AASC, ask. And of course, the very first thing that is not on this is you have to listen. So no yabba dabba doing, no butting our clients when they give us an objection. Oh, you're too expensive. Yeah, but we're the cheapest ones out there. Like no yabba dabba do, first of all. But so the first is after we've listened and heard them and taken a breath, we then acknowledge them. Oh, wow. I can see why that would be a concern. Oh, yeah, no, I see that you saw that price was lower for the other company, or oh, I would really be worried about that too. Oh, that much. Like it's really easy to acknowledge other people. All you have to do, and don't just repeat their words back to them, because nobody wants that, but acknowledge that they have expressed a concern, a worry, a fear, and it is real to them. Acknowledge them. You will get so much further if you just acknowledge them. It's a huge stumbling block. Second is ask. Okay, they've told you something, you've acknowledged it. Now you're going to ask a couple more questions to really understand what the issue is. Oh, you said price is the issue. Tell me more about that. Do you have a specific budget that you have to meet? Are you wanting to make sure that you're paying the lowest price? Like, tell me more about that. Okay, so now that we understand it, we can go to solve. Because we can't solve until we've done those first steps, because they don't care about your solution if you haven't acknowledged them, and your solution is worthless if you don't really understand it. So we go acknowledge, ask, solve, and then confirm. Okay, let me just make sure. If we can do this, you will be ready to buy from us.
Great.
And then move on. So that's my ask. And I have to give some credit to my sister, Alice, because she and I came up with this together. So I didn't come up with that by myself, but I think it's really powerful. Okay.
The thing I would add in there, and this is really powerful, put it up on the whiteboard. You've got it listed here. You go through those things, share an alternate perspective just a little bit before. Don't ask 3 questions. Ask 1 question and listen for the response.
And listen.
Yeah, just 1 question, like simple. If when we add too much complexity, we don't know what they're responding to, and we're giving them an out, and we're starting to lead the person on the other end. And unfortunately, especially in situations where people just want to get off the phone, they may tell you exactly what you want to hear. And where are you? Like,
So if you guys want, I have a what do you call it? Infographic that has that ask. If you guys want it, just send me a note on LinkedIn and say, hey, Liz, will you send that to me? And I'd be happy to send it. Okay. So
Hey, Liz, will you send that to me?
Sure will.
Can I say, if you steal the one that I set up there before, just say that you stole it?
Say that I stole what?
No, not you stole it. You didn't steal anything. I just said you have yours. The one that I asked where I was like, hey, ask, listen, decide. Then either ask or share. Like, if you steal that, let us know how it works too. Like, we're all learning together.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, I will tell you, when someone gives the right credit, I have a different view of them. Right? And a lot of people are like, well, I want to take credit for it because it sounds so smart. But when I hear or I read a book and I see that someone gives credit, I have so much respect for that person. Like there are 3 or 4 things that I give credit to all the time. Like, I give a statistics. I'm always saying where I got it. If you use something and you tell people where you got it, you come across as smarter than if you acted as if it were your own, because it means that you're out there learning from other people all the time. So give the credit. That's all. Sorry.
And you had one last thing.
Yeah, I just wanted to share, since we're talking about questions, I really just wanted to share, there are a couple, I probably deal with more salespeople than the rest of you, like calling on me for things. And I cannot stand one in particular and how it starts. So tell me about your business, because they're trying to be.
What keeps you up at night, Renee?
Yeah, like anything that starts off with like you're starting a conversation and asking me to like do the work of this sales call, right? Like, it's just such a bad experience. And the second one, which is taking something close to your ask, Liz, but not doing it as elegantly. The 5 whys, which is like the Toyota thing, right? Like, where you get to the root cause of something. It's one thing for me to do that with my team because we're trying to solve a problem internally. And it's another for a salesperson to drill me for, and if that doesn't happen, what causes that? And what, like it's very, intrusive, right? So
I'm
you're
gonna
much
stop
more
you, Renee. I'm going to stop you because that's where we're going next. So let's pick up from there as we start and talk about, in our next episode, we're going to talk about some of the things not to do when you're asking questions and some of the things to do. And Mike, you have one more thing to say?
Just really, really quick one. This is one of those things where I think people get too hung up on the whole, like, tell me a little bit about your business, or what are you struggling with, or what keeps you up at night, or whatever. When you ask that question, ask it with the intention to learn, and make sure that you've done your homework.
Mike, let's go here. Because we're going to do our next episode on questions. So I'm going to stop you both.
Okay.
We're going to end this episode, but Chris had something to say about objections before we end. And then I'm making you to start the next segment talking about this stuff, because this is really powerful. Chris, you had something to say about objections before we go?
No, I was fine with us switching to the next episode. So
all right.
Maybe that's where the
Renee and Mike are chomping at the bit. So we're going to wrap up this episode. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Sales SOS podcast. And we will see you in the next episode. Okay, you guys ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. I'm Liz Hyman, and I'm here with your Sales SOS podcast crew: Bryn Tillman, Chris Bowen, Mike Simmons, and Renee Bigelow. And I have to apologize because I have terrible allergies. So my voice sounds really awful right now. So please bear with me. I will let your crew talk more than I do. I promise.
It's Liz's sexy voice.
Gosh, I hope not. So we are talking about selling in uncertain times because here we are in the middle of uncertain times again, right? Which I think is sort of the nature of the market. We do really well and then things go crazy in the world, and then we do really well and then things go crazy. So in this time right now, or any time when things are uncertain and sales aren't easy, we tend to get really frustrated with our sales teams, but our sales teams need the skills that to be successful. And it's our job to make sure that they have the skills to be successful. So if they're floundering, then take a step back and let's look at where they're missing the skills. And the skill that we want to talk about right now is asking good questions. And I think this is incredibly powerful because there are all kinds of things that we do that are not fun for our clients when it comes to asking questions. And Renee and Mike, in our last episode, we're starting to talk about this, and I'm going to have them jump back in. And Mike, I want to remind you, you and I were talking about BANT, and I'm pretty sure it was you who said to me, have you ever been BANTed? And how did you like it? Was it you that said that to me?
Oh, I probably did say it, but I'd heard it from somebody else in the same thing like this. Yes, I've said that before, and other people have said it. I don't know.
And I think I've heard Daryl Krell say
or any
it.
of those things.
And me.
And Britt. Okay, so we're going to talk about that for sure. So let's talk about, we're going to talk about how to ask good questions, but we're going to start by talking about how not to ask good questions. What are the things that people are doing that really just don't work? And Renee gave us an example, and then Mike gave us an example. So Renee, start on what you were talking about. If you're going to ask questions.
Yeah. So I mean, marketing is one of the biggest buyers of a lot of things in companies right now. Marketing's probably has the most tech outside of IT in almost any company. There's a huge MarTech solution. We do trade show things. We buy things that we give away, or, like there's a lot of selling to marketing. And I will tell you, I really don't believe this is just me, but I'm going to tell on myself a little bit here and say, if you start a conversation with me, like first time we're talking, and you come in with, so tell me about your business, it is the equivalent of taking me on a first date and saying, so do you want to have kids? Like, what is your thoughts on marriage and kids? And nothing will throw my guard up more, right, than you saying that and me being like offended that you expect me to spill all of my secrets to you and you haven't even like introduced yourself, essentially, right? And I think another version of that, which your ask, which we should probably explain again here, your ask framework is much more elegant. But while I love the 5 whys that Toyota uses, I think Salesforce refers to it as 5 levels of questions instead of the 5 whys. Trying to get to the root cause. What is the root pain? Like if I really solve what the source of your pain is, then you're obviously going to buy from me. It's a very invasive way of questioning. It's one thing for me to do that with my team and solve a problem internal. And it's another for somebody, again, like, maybe on the second date or something, to be like, well, if that doesn't do that, then why does this happen? And why does that, like, that's putting me back on my heels as a buyer. So those are the 2 that I find repeatedly drive me crazy.
Okay, so Renee, hang on a second. So the first is do your homework before you pick up the phone, and don't expect me to carry the work of the conversation, and don't ask me questions you haven't earned the right to ask. And the second is you don't get to ask me, well, why? Well, why? Well, why? In hopes of getting to my deepest, darkest secrets. Like, yeah. I'm going to share with you what I'm comfortable sharing with you. Don't interrogate me. You haven't earned the right to interrogate me. In fact, you never have the right to interrogate me. Okay, Mike. Ready, set, go.
I don't agree with Renee. And here's why. And I appreciate Renee. I appreciate the perspective. I appreciate all of that stuff. It's we have gotten ourselves into a situation where we have beaten curiosity out of people by pushing back on the questions that are asked. And unfortunately, what ends up happening, if you think about it, like a 2-year-old around the house, anybody ever have a 2-year-old around their house? What do they like to ask?
Why?
Why?
What do they have to ask after you share?
Why?
And then what do they ask after that?
Why?
Right. It just keeps going. But so we ask these questions. Why? Because for most of us, there's a genuine level of curiosity in getting a way to understand. Now, at the same time, I can get that piece of information that I want to get out without asking a why question. I can ask a how question or a what question or a when question. I can share a little bit of context and I can change things a little bit. So when you watch people in that environment, watch for their nonverbal. Do they lean back? Do they lean in? Do they start looking at other pieces? Do they dig their heels in? Whatever the thing is, and ask questions in the context of what's important to the customer and how they like to communicate and how they want to communicate. And those pieces, because they're the ones who have insight, have information inside their head between their ears that is private information. It is not public information. There is still public information that's out there. And if you go to a conversation without looking at that public information first, you're not doing your job. You're not prepared. You've not planned properly. And you put yourself into a situation where you're going to not handle that conversation very well. You will have zero credibility. It's still okay to ask the questions why. Like, how are you measured? What's important to you? What are you stressed about? Like, and here's the deal. If someone doesn't want to answer that question, they're probably not the right person to be talking to because they don't have the kind of thing that you might be able to solve for. So use your two eyes, your two ears to accept signals in when you're communicating and your one mouth to ask those questions in context. So it's not that the why question is a bad question. It does create defensiveness. It does, like, why'd you do it that way? Or what were you thinking? Like, all of those are things that sound bad. Or, well, what happened right before that? Oh, God, that's kind of sucks. How'd that happen? What would you have done differently? Like, all of these things, these are simple questions that we can ask that will get what's happening in this conversation to happen in your customer conversations. People will start nodding. People will start engaging. People will start reacting in different ways. It's when someone gets a script that says, these are the 20 questions to business that you need to go in there and ask to go through and qualify, whatever. That's where things fall apart, because what you've done is you've created a bunch of machines that aren't thinking in the way they go about it. So that's why I disagree with Renee's on the way that piece was presented, because I think you can do those things and do it with empathy and do it with sincerity and do it with curiosity and do it with a way where you can lead your customers forward. Because a lot of times people don't know why they've got a headache, even when they've got a nail sticking through the side of their head.
Go ahead, Bryn.
So I love both of what Renee and Mike said, even if they are not 100% aligned. I think they're great. But a couple things I want to share. Number one, I tell my clients, never, ever, ever, ever ask a question you could have learned from their LinkedIn profile. Ever. If I get on a call with someone who's trying to sell me and they go, so where are you sitting? Like, you don't know? Now, if they get on and say, hey, I see you're in the greater New York area, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, great, right? Because they took that information. And with AI today, you can, before any call, you can upload, you can put in a link to a LinkedIn profile and the link to their website, and you could get 90% of what you need that's public. That will lead to the conversation. So that's where you start to earn the right, because you did your homework. You're prepared. If you don't do pre-call planning, especially with the ability to drop anything into AI in 30 seconds, get it all, really, you're going to get wiped out by the people that do. Okay. Number two, don't bant me. Budget, authority, need, timing, right? Bant. People have been taught bant, but what does bant mean? If I come to a sales conversation and I say, so Mike, what's your budget for this? For what? So is there anyone other than yourself that will be involved in this decision? What decision? Do you have a current need? Like, all of those questions are what I need to make a sale, not what I need to solve his problem. So Bant is so self-absorbed, and it's so frustrating. I was in a new company, did not stay there long, years ago, and I was in the ride along with the leader of the company, the leader of the sales team, and she banted. We were in Marisource, Bergen. I landed the appointment as a newbie, but I didn't know enough to run that appointment yet. So I had to bring my boss's boss to that appointment, and she banted, and we were kicked out in 7 minutes. When you ask someone, what is your budget, and you have not determined anything about what they need, that's it's insane. Because it's all about what we want to hear to make the sale. It has nothing to do with what they need. And so the bottom line in all of this, all of the questions need to lead to solving their problem before they lead to how do I charge them to solve the problem.
Start with understanding their problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that we don't need to qualify, because we do need to qualify, and we need to qualify people out so we're not wasting time. But we don't just start with BANT questions. We don't just start by deciding whether or not you're willing to spend another minute with them based on whether or not they are clear about what they're buying, when they're buying, and how much they're spending. Like, that's not naturally how people make buying decisions. And what I will tell you is, if they can answer those questions right off the top of their head, somebody's already figured out what they're buying, how they're buying it, and they've sent somebody out to go talk to multiple companies. So they're pretty far down their sales process if they have their budget clearly defined and the project clearly defined. So anyway, Mike, what do you got for us? You just cleared, Mike, you didn't see it if you weren't with us on LinkedIn Live or you're not watching the video. Mike just cleaned off the whiteboard. He's ready to go. What you got for us?
I've never seen a clean whiteboard behind Mike.
The first thing, and this is a problem solving framework that I've got out in the marketplace. I've shared a number of different places. It looks like a hexagon, and it's the most complex tool that I implement inside organizations. And it will change the way that you think about asking questions inside your organization. That's my commitment. The first question we want to understand is what? It's what is the problem that we're looking to solve? So we've got what at the top. The next set of questions we want to understand are who. Like, who has the problem? Who's impacted by the problem? Who cares about the people who have or are impacted by the problem? When we go into that who piece, we can understand perspective. Remember, there's 3 perspectives: has, impacted, cares. The people who care typically have money. The people who have impacted will have influence. The people who have are struggling with it right now and don't know how to get out. So who? The next piece that we want to know is why. This gets into what Renee was talking about a little bit earlier around root cause analysis. Why does the problem persist? Do your 5 whys. Go deep. Try to figure out what is happening. Channel that inner 2-year-old. Why does it persist? And the piece that we tend to forget, why is it important to solve? What is the business impact of solving that problem? Once we know those, kind of got a little bit of Mary Poppins thing going here, but we've got this Mary Poppins approach to problem solving. I know my top 3 things. I've now earned the right, using some Bryn language, earned the right to get into how. How are they solving it today? How might we solve it in the future? Current state versus desired state. So we have how, then we can move into when. When does it need to happen by? And then we move into short-term, medium-term, long-term planning, 30, 60, 90 type planning. And that will fill out the hexagon. And I'll go back there to do it just because my microphone's I don't have my lav mic on. If you want to go deep into this, this is a quick way for you to go through and say, do I really understand things from the perspective of the customer? Or have I missed certain questions and now this shape can't hold water? So again, we go how, when, and then really what's next. So 30, 60, 90, what's going to happen? 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 9 weeks, 3 years, 6 years, whatever it is, short-term, medium-term, long-term. So we get a basic plan. And if any of those lines can't be filled out, we've got risk. That shape can't hold water, and it draws attention to what other questions we can be asking. And this feels comfortable. And one of the reasons I have a whiteboard is I can go through this with people in real time and put things up on a board together and build together. Then it feels not like something that's being done to you. It feels like something that's being done for you. It's an act of service. And Anthony Iannarino says this out loud. Sales is not something that is done to somebody, it's done for somebody. Like, this is powerful.
You can't see, we're all nodding our heads. So if you're listening and not watching, every single one of us was just nodding our heads. Keep going.
And thanks, Liz. This is a powerful way to go through questions and gather information in a way where you start to feel like you're building together with your customer. The dirty little secret behind that started as an account plan framework that was ultimately used as a qualification framework when I had to scale qualification and account planning across a large group of people. I've reshaped it into a problem-solving framework because some people don't like salespeople, and there are a lot of people who are struggling with solving problems. So this is a good way to do it. But that's a simple way to kind of work your way around the questions. The only one that's missing there, if you've ever did any journalism, is where. We don't get into the where piece, and that could be another one that you add in there. But typically, at least in the kind of stuff that I was doing, it's not where wasn't a critical piece. But hopefully that was helpful.
Very helpful.
Well, I think one of the things you have to look at is if you're selling anything that's moderately complex, you're not going to have a one call close. It's going to be multiple conversations that you're going to have. Some of these things that may feel like a question firing squad that you're having to face, maybe you have to put those things off to the next conversation. You need to also figure out the person you're talking with might not be the best person to answer every one of those questions for you to get to your root cause. So you need to be able to be willing and open to expanding the people that you're talking to within that organization. And you should want to do that anyway, but that way you're going to get those perspectives. You're going to get those questions answered. You just don't have to do it all at one time. There's things you need to know. There's things that you need to know eventually, and you need to be able to figure out where you're at. So
I think a lot of times, oh, sorry, Renee, just a quick one. A lot of times when people are early in their decision-making process, or they're finding a solution or understanding that they have a problem process, giving them space to talk is really powerful. So it's not about asking super specific questions and getting super specific answers. It's about helping them figure out what the problem is. So depending upon where you are in their sales, in their buying process, the way you ask questions and who you ask questions to, what questions you ask, that all really matters. And I know, like, in the early part of the sales process, one of my favorite questions is, like, what's working and what isn't? Because we go in assuming they have a problem and everything is wrong, but usually it's not 100% wrong. There are things that work and there are things that don't work. And giving them the ability to talk about, this is what's going really well. This is what's not going really well. I don't want to mess this up, but I want to fix this. Like, it frees them up to talk. And I think that's one of, depending again where we are, there's open-ended questions, there's closed-ended questions, there's confirmation questions, there's all these different kinds of questions. Depending upon where you are in the process, the kinds of questions that you ask matter. And early on, open-ended questions are powerful. Sometimes later on, closed-ended questions are powerful. So just sort of thinking about, where are you? Where are they? What will help them make a decision? And then Renee, I cut you off again. So
no, I was 100% agreeing that it's a process. And that's why I say coming in hot is going to put someone on defense and it feel intrusive, right? It's not that you are not trying to get the information. It's about how you're going about it, right? So BANT is still good for you to get in sales. It is not, as Bryn pointed out, good for you to ask. There are lots of ways to get information. And to your point, Liz, if we get into a real conversation, you aren't going to have to ask many of the questions because you're guiding me down a path where I want to voluntarily share information with you, right? That's a totally different, and honestly, it helps you save a lot of your negotiating power for later, right? Because you haven't asked for so much from me up front that I've given you everything that you're already going to get, right? If you have let me guide you down somewhat, then you can ask for more later. And that's where often you need the ask, right? So I agree 100% in having all of those fields, if you will, that you need filled in, but kind of waiting to see what I offer before you come in hot helps save some of that power differential, if you will, for when you need it.
Yeah, you have to earn the right to get those answers.
And you'll get a lot of them, right? Like if you let me say what I want to say, you'll probably get more than if you drill me with questions, right? So saving the questions for where I've dropped off and haven't filled in the gaps gets you so much more. I also will just share, because we didn't address it earlier on, but one of the things that I see, and we talked about sales enablement materials in the last one about overcoming objections. I think in asking questions and understanding and getting in the right frame for the conversations to try and get people to open up, I see a lot of really underdeveloped target personas, and a really good target persona canvas should help you open up a lot of these kinds of things. It helps you understand where someone is a lot better. You can, if you have a, I'm trying not to use the word should, Bryn, because I really do try to avoid it. But the document should be able to help with this, right? If the document is fully complete, then you should be able to tell like where your target persona really falls on growth focus versus risk. What kinds of things look like high value to them? What are some top high value things for them? You should be able to understand a little bit more about how their day, what it looks like. Are they in meetings all day long? Are they pressed for time? Are they, trying to solve problems most of the day? Like you can get a lot of that framework kind of built out for you so that you can have a real conversation. And I see a lot of underdeveloped target personas that are mostly company and person demographics and not like what is going on and what is that person trying to do and how are they thinking and what is their role like and what are the things that come up in their world, all of that sort of thing. And when you have that really fleshed out, it makes it a lot easier for someone to enter into a real conversation.
Chris, you got anything for us?
I think I'm good for the moment. I mean, I think that, it's always going to come down to being curious, right? Do you actually care? Do you want to understand the answer? And after it, to be honest, are you willing at that point to qualify somebody out if they don't fit what you can do, or refer them to somebody else that can, right? But don't try to shoehorn your solution to fit what you think a need is and then end up failing. So
and I want to say this really clearly, and I think everybody needs to listen carefully, and that is, I can coach your sales team on a lot of things. I can teach them a lot of skills. I can coach them around asking questions. I cannot teach them to be curious, and I cannot teach them to care. And if they are neither curious nor care, they probably shouldn't be on your team, right? So we want salespeople who are those things, who care and want to help our customers solve problems, want to understand what's going on. So, I think it's super important. I think that caring thing, that curiosity thing is super important. And when we care about our customers, we don't bant them. When we care about our customers, we don't we don't bombard them with questions and interrogate them. We have conversations with them that help them make the decisions. So I'm going to wrap up this episode of the Sales SOS podcast. Thanks for joining us. In our next episode, we're going to be talking about reading buyer signals and closing deals. So thanks for joining us. Okay, and Bryn, I know you need to leave as part of this, so I'll let you lead off, and then I think this one maybe won't be quite as long as some of the others, but here we go. Bryn, I can't hear you. Bryn, you're on mute.
So just FYI, in 8 minutes, I will be hanging out with my 2-year-old granddaughter and my 4-year-old granddaughter. So I'm going to hear why for the rest of the night.
And I want to thank all the folks who are sitting with us and have hung out with us all this time. Thanks for being there with us in LinkedIn Live. We're going to jump into our final episode of this month's Sales SOS podcast. You ready? Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. I'm Liz Hyman, and I'm here with your Sales SOS podcast crew, Bryn Tillman, Chris Bowen, Mike Simmons, and Renee Bigelow. And I have to apologize to you. I have asthma and allergies, so my voice sounds really squeaky. So you will be hearing more from the crew than from me today for sure. Today, we're talking about selling in difficult environments. And right now is a very unsettling time. It's hard to know exactly what's coming next. And people are unsure, which makes selling even harder. So in a time when selling is difficult, when people are more unsure, it's more important that your sales team has the skills they need to succeed. So in the last episodes, we talked about asking good questions, and we talked about building credibility. In this episode, we're going to talk specifically about reading buyer signals, which I think is really hard, and closing deals. And so I'm not sure who wants to start. Maybe Bryn will start. She's not going to be with us this whole episode. She's got to jump out, like she said, she's going to go hang out with her grandbabies. So before we jump to everybody else, Bryn, buyer signals, that's a really hard thing right now.
So there are some buyer signals that are very obvious that we don't leverage. So I personally use Sales Navigator on LinkedIn, and there are buyer signals where they will say, hey, they looked at a profile of someone in your organization, or they were on your website. Very obvious buyer signals. I also use smart links, which is a feature in the middle or advanced tier of Sales Navigator, where I have a hub of content and I can see when people look at it. So if I have a proposal that I put out, what's great is I send it out. I see that, my buying committee has looked at it. And then weeks later, I will see, hey, now the CEO just looked at it. And so that's a buying signal. And I'm sorry that Daryl is not here for this story because he's part of it. When he worked at VanillaSoft, I gave him a very nice proposal for LinkedIn training for his peeps. And he was lovely and didn't buy. And then about a year and a half later, I got a notification that said Daryl was looking at my proposal. And I'm like, ooh. And I looked, and Daryl was now at Agorapulse. So I reached out to Daryl and I said, hey, bud, congratulations on the new role. So I guess LinkedIn training is on the conversation, is, up for conversation. He said to me, he goes, how do you know that? And I told him how I knew that. And I said, I could teach your team to do the same thing. So, I ended up to be the first vendor he brought on at Agorapulse. That was a buying trigger. So there has to be there's got to be triggers that we set throughout our prospecting, throughout areas that we can get notified when someone is interested. Even if they clicked through an email, right? If you've got a HubSpot, or we use Kajabi, and we can see who's active and we can report on who's clicking through and who's not. Those are all buying triggers, and they could be looking at your LinkedIn profile is a very low level buying trigger, interest trigger. conversation starter, downloading an ebook, right? All of those things at the very top of the funnel, all the way through, are buying triggers. And guys, I had so much fun with you. I'm going to listen back to all of your answers. You guys rock.
Thanks, Bryn.
Thanks, Bryn.
Okay. So buying signals and closing deals. So I love the way Bryn is able to put things in the context of social media and how you do it. There's other kinds of buying signals that we also get. One of the things that I think is really confusing in this world right now is not answering my email a buying signal? Like, does that mean they're not interested if they're not answering my emails, especially if we've already had a conversation and we'll hear salespeople talk about I've been ghosted, which I think is a very self-centered way of looking at it. You weren't ghosted. Your client either is busy or needs some time, or this isn't the priority right this moment, or they sprained their ankle playing soccer, right? So you weren't ghosted. Something happened with your client that they're no longer having this conversation with you. But let's talk about some of the other buyer signals. How do you know when yes is coming and when no is coming? How do you interpret that? And I'm going to let you guys mostly have this conversation. And I also think, like, one of the big things that people ask me is what are the hacks for closing deals, Liz? That's my favorite question. What's the hack for closing a deal? What am I supposed to say? What do I say to close that deal? And I think that for a lot of beginning sellers, this is a huge issue. They just don't know what the buyer signal is that they're ready to buy, and they have no idea once they've gotten that signal what to do about it. So I'm going to let you guys hash that out. Mike, it looks like you're ready to start.
I think there's signals. First, let's talk about how do you receive signals. So from a communication standpoint, we can use our eyes, we can use our ears, so we can see what's happening, we can hear what's happening, we can listen. We can see things that happen inside data. The big signal for me, and I know there are a lot of people out there who say this is a crap question to ask, but I like to ask this question. What questions do you have for me? There are a lot of people who are out there saying that is one of the worst questions that you could ask. And according to all the Gong data, this is why you shouldn't do this and all that other kind of crap. Whatever. Here's what my perspective is. When I ask that question, what I'm looking for is, are they actually curious? Are they interested in something? Do they actually have something that they're trying to figure out on their side? If they don't, that's an indicator. One decision I could make is I could add something else, or I could decide, okay, well, maybe that's not the right time or right place. But if you ask the question and then listen for the response, people will typically give you the signal that they're thinking about, or a signal that you can at least interpret. In that instance, and I really like that you brought it up, Liz, that, hey, what happens when someone has gone silent on me? Sometimes people just go silent because they have nothing to communicate. You're not the most important person in their world. They don't need.
How could you say that, Mike?
They don't need you to check in on them. They don't need you to just follow up. They don't need you to do those things. They have friends and family members and other people and other sales reps who are doing the same thing. Sometimes their silence is they just don't have anything to communicate. A quick way to overcome that is setting the expectation of when your weekly meetings are, or bi-weekly meetings are, or monthly meetings are with your team, and when others are expecting an update. And the first time you may not get a response, the second time you may not get a response, but the third time, when you're consistently asking it at the same time, someone on the other end is going to say, look, here, I'm not sharing anything because I don't have anything to share with you. I want to help you out. Like, if they're interested and they're engaged in the process, they'll help you out at that point. And one of the cool things about setting that expectation and executing against it is you actually will improve credibility and trust, because you're showing up when you say you're going to show up, and their confidence will actually start to increase related to that. But you're just not that important.
That's a tough one. I'm just not that important. I'm going to go back to that asking if you have any questions for me, there are lots of ways to ask that question, right? We've talked about a bunch of things. Are there any things that I didn't answer yet? Or are there any things that, you're still missing information about? Or are there any areas that we haven't touched on that you still need information? There's lots of ways to ask that. And I think we do whatever Gong says. And I think Gong has some really cool attributes. It does some really cool things. But in the conversation that I'm having with you in the moment, it's important for me to be respectful to you as a buyer. And one of the ways that I can be respectful to you as a buyer is to make sure that I've answered everything that you need answered in this moment. Now that may change at another point, but by just saying, okay, you don't get to ask any more questions, I'm done with this conversation, I'm not going to open it back up to you. Sometimes we don't want to do that because we don't want to give them the opportunity to find another objection. And I've told you guys this story. I know I have. Salespeople tend to want to focus on the possibilities and ignore the things that could possibly get in the way, right? So this idea of objections, this idea that if I don't talk about it, if I don't give them the opportunity to bring it up, maybe they won't object, or they won't ask that question, or they won't tell me the thing that I don't want to hear. And when I was a kid, we used to have a dog. She was a German Shepherd, and she was a pretty little German Shepherd, but her little mouth and her teeth could just get right to your butt. So when you turned your back on her, she would just take a little nip out of your butt. She didn't like you to turn her back on her. And what I will tell you about objections and things that could possibly go wrong, if you turn your back on them, if you ignore them, just like when I used to ignore that pup, they will bite you in the butt every single time, right? Don't be afraid of what you don't want to hear. Don't be afraid of the objection, because if you don't address it, if you don't find out that Susie really doesn't want this to happen and she's going to do everything in her power to undermine it, you have no way to navigate it, and you're going to be blindsided. So I think people need the opportunity to ask whatever questions they want, and we need to open the door for them. So sorry, Gong, if I'm out of order here, but
well, I mean, avoiding. Sorry, Renee.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I think avoiding the question doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? And so if you don't answer it, they still have the question. You haven't addressed anything related to it. That's only going to weaken their resolve around it as it gets older, right? Like it's just not gonna go well. So avoiding the question is futile, because it's gonna come back up, and when it comes back up, now they've potentially gone to your competition and gotten better answers on that question, or an answer at all, and you avoided it. So who do they have more confidence in? The people that they've had those conversations with who haven't been scared, or the people that they've had the conversation with that were like, no, here's what we do, or here's how we think you should think about this differently. Sometimes it's a matter of the way they frame the question isn't the way you solve it, but you still solve something similar or in a different way. So you need to be able to understand it better.
Go ahead, Renee.
Yes to all that. And I have something else to add, but I do want to also say, I think this asking, again, I'm going to say this from a buyer perspective as much as from anything, but asking when things do get drawn out, or there is a pause, or you're not sure what's going on, I think that is the best time to say, do you need anything from me? And first of all, I can't avoid saying this one. I do ban the word check-in whenever I work with a sales team close enough that that I have any influence over it. I ban the word check-in because
or follow up.
Follow up is a little better, but like I'm checking in. Like now your insecurity is my problem. Like, like.
But I love I'm just following up. So here I am as the client, and you're just following up. That's your sentence. That means I now have to go, where were we? where were we in this conversation? Or who is this person that's following up with me? Because frankly, I don't remember, right?
And don't get me wrong, when I need to follow up with someone, with a prospect who's reached out to me, it's really easy to type check-in and then delete, like realize I'm saying it too, right? Like I get it, but I unless I have been told to check in and that language has been used, I try to never use it. Please check in with me, call it a check-in, tell me, help keep me on track, right? That's different. That's
Yep.
allowed use. But that question of what can I do for you? What can I do to help? Is there anything that I can do to help? Like, because it's gotten more drawn out, did something happen? Do you need something from me? I think that's the most powerful timing for that question. I mean, certainly at the end of a conversation, I have no problem with it. But in between is when I think it has a lot of power. The thing that I wanted to add to the whole conversation, though, because we might have confused a few people, we talked about triggers and we talked about buyer signals.
Yeah.
And I think it might be helpful to just take a step back and talk about how sometimes a trigger is a buyer signal too, but often you're looking for triggers as part of your go-to-market, right? Like what are the things that would move someone into the market, right? And what would move them from considering into actually high intent and move them into considering, like moving into actively looking for a solution, right? So if you use the buyer's pyramid and you're getting up to that 3% are actually like in the market at any given time, right? So if we take that next 7% that are kind of open to a solution, right? We could maybe stretch that to 5%, a percent of those people who are open kind of moving into it. So about 5% of the market at any given time are in the market, right? So we're looking for the things that would most likely move them into it. Those are our triggers, right? Mergers and acquisitions, there's a lot of triggers around that. New hires, there's a lot of trigger around that. Launch of new products, opening new offices or branches, right? Like you can come up with a lot of things in your target persona, things that would happen that would be triggers, right? The reason why I say we kind of get them convoluted here is you can have a trigger happen while you're actively talking to a buyer, right? And so that's kind of a trigger and a signal all at the same time. So like you're talking to someone and they get a new boss, guess what? There's a trigger happening right there. Those things can get intertwined, but understanding triggers helps you sometimes move the conversation through. And understanding buyer signals is paying attention to what the buyer is telling you, right? Like if they've slowed down, I think that's a perfect time, as I said, to say, is there anything else I can do for you, right? If you hear there's big news in their company, that's a signal, and a trigger combined in one, and you can not check in. You can offer something based on what's going on in their company. So I think those are important. I do think that things like Bryn said, like looking at a LinkedIn profile is also a signal, right? It could be a trigger if it's somebody you've never talked to, but it can be a signal. So understanding when one is a signal and one is a trigger, I think we sometimes call them triggers in marketing because they trigger a workflow, right? Like if you do this, then these things will happen. But that's still based on a signal often.
Okay, you guys, what's the secret hack magic to close deals? Say this.
Doesn't exist. Good luck.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just like that whole piece around, do you want to be banted? Who really wants to be closed?
Are you? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. There's always one. Usually it's typically in front of an audience of somewhere between 250 and 500 people. There's always one, maybe two who raise their hand, just like you did, Liz. So thank you for being the 1 in 4. There's as you go through this and you ask that question around, hey, how many people like to be sold to? Raise your hand, Liz. How many people like to buy things? Everybody kind of smiles and raises their hand. So we like to buy things, but we don't like being sold to. We like to buy things because we like to solve problems. We don't like being sold to because it feels like something we're being forced into. So on the closing piece, of things. If the next logical step is the signature, then you've done your job really, really well. If the next logical step is something different, then move toward that next thing. And sometimes that next logical step is to introduce them to somebody else who can better serve them. So it's not about closing or tips or tricks or any of those other things. It's about how do you design a journey so that each step just makes sense. That next step makes sense. That next step can be, hey, at what point do we bring your implementation team into the conversation to help set up our project plan? Or how do we introduce this next person in? Or how do we have this kind of scoping call? Or how do we have whatever it is? So focus on next logical steps and you won't have to worry about closing.
Yep. Where I was going to go was more of, do you understand how they buy? If you understand their buying process, you'll have a lot better understanding of knowing where you're at within that process. And if you understand the next steps to get to each one of those places, even better, because then you can know with relative certainty where you're at. And then it helps a whole lot. But then, that's just part of the conversation of being able to understand that organization, how they buy, what they need to get done for different types of purchases at different levels, and who has to be included in those decisions, and then being able to work through that.
It's okay to ask the question, if we do these things, does it make sense for us to move forward?
Yeah.
If we do these things, is the next step that we enter into an agreement or we review legal? Like, it's okay to ask those questions, but ask them at the right time and right place. Don't be talking to Renee in the first conversation, wondering about kids. Like, it just is awkward.
Yep. No, I mean, I think you have to be able to understand their process and understand where you're going to ask those questions, right? And be able to know when you're on track and when you're not, and who has to be included in the decisions. And that it's not anything more complex than that. It's a lot of work, but if you have an understanding of it makes things a whole lot easier when you get down to that part. The one thing I think people frequently shy away from is, if their vendor management or procurement department's going to be involved, get them involved earlier so what things have to be done just from a governance perspective to get your deal through. Because otherwise you're going to get to the 11th hour and you're going to find out, oh, there's these 3 things that we haven't done yet. It could be security related. It could
You have
be
to go through the process, right? To
Yeah.
be an approved vendor.
Right. And you haven't done all of those steps, or you got it started late. That's going to delay your deal. Guaranteed.
Yeah. This is where I think that, what else can I do for you? What do you need from me? This is those complex things. I think a lot of pauses are often those complex things. And I might be more of a closed buyer and not give you the whole thing. But if you're
Sure.
constantly asking, what else do you need from me? In the best way, like not,
Yep.
Not like a desperate way or whatever, right? Like in the best way, where if you are regularly checking to make sure that you have helped get me as much as possible, then even if I'm not giving you all the information, which happens, right? Then you can serve my needs. Like, I don't have to tell you all my deep dark secrets. You can serve my needs without me telling you my deep dark secret. It's obviously easier for all of us, but I may have reasons, right? I may have been told by my boss, don't give up negotiating power. Right?
Yep.
Don't tell them what our budget is. Like, why do I owe you to tell you what our budget is?
Or typically your calls are also time bound when you have them. Especially if you're talking to people, you've put that time in for a certain point of time. If you try to rush through it, you're going to lose a lot during the course of that call. A lot of credibility, a lot of the interpersonal connection that you could build. You can put some of that stuff off, but if you try to rush through it because, I'm getting at the end of my 30-minute call and I have to get these things in, it's going to come off as really, really forced and really about you, not about them.
Yeah. And
Go ahead, Renee.
I was just going to say the other thing Mike touched on earlier too. we'll go back to that buyer's pyramid about if we really are, you talked about people saying they don't like to be sold to. I actually think people who are in the market don't mind being sold to, right? They're in the market. They want information. So a lot of this, like, I don't like to be sold to, or I don't like to be marketed to. People who don't like to be marketed to are getting ads that aren't relevant, or copy, or things that just don't feel like it relates to them, right? People who say they don't like to be sold to generally aren't in the market for what they're being sold to. So making sure that that's where a lot of this comes from. So if, and I say this because, and I always feel an obligation to mention this when we get into this closing part, there's a push often to improve conversion rates. And let's say we get somebody who's kind of like, I'm open to buying, but I'm not actively in the market yet. It's not a bad lead. And if we're pushing our person, you've had them in your pipeline for X amount of time, blah, 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 right? Close and get them out of your pipeline. Well, that's not the buyer's timeline, right? That's our timeline. So I just feel the need to kind of say that, like, they are probably not ready for close, and they probably should have some sort of plan for, we can call it check-in internally, but like to see how things are moving, where they're moving to, figure out buyer signals, figure out triggers that could move them forward. But I think that because we have so much pressure on sales teams to close within a certain amount of time, that we're selling to people who aren't quite ready. And that's where a mismatch comes in.
And I think that that's when closing becomes really difficult, right? I'm trying to close somebody who isn't ready to close. If I'm helping somebody get through the buying process and I'm guiding them through, here are the steps you have to take.
100%.
If you want this by this date, you've got to sign this contract so we can get the people in place or whatever it is to do this for you. Closing becomes really hard when you're trying to figure out, and we get this all the time. How do we speed up their close? How do we, what can we do to, what's the word? I can't think what I want, what everybody's always saying, but urgency.
Create urgency.
What, Mike?
Create urgency.
Create urgency, right? Everybody wants to create urgency, but not everybody has urgency. The urgency is on your part. It isn't on their part. And if you work too hard at creating urgency, you might unsell what's coming. So if they're not ready to buy and you're trying to close, and for God's sake, sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Stop constantly closing. Don't always be closing. For goodness sake, do not always be closing, because I'm not always ready to buy. I don't know who made that up, but they ought to be slapped. Do not do that ever. Ask questions, keep it the momentum, but don't try to close somebody who's not ready to make a buy, who's not ready to buy right now. You've got to work with them in their time zone.
You could be kicking out someone that is your future pipeline, right? I agree that you need to understand where they belong, right? Like, because you need to focus in your efforts, and you need to be able to forecast, and like there are lots of things, but those people who have gotten this close but aren't ready yet, they're your future pipeline.
So, and you can take them out of if you need to take them out of the funnel, take them out of the funnel, mark that deal lost, put them in your call in 6 weeks list of to-dos, and keep it going. Yeah. But don't arbitrarily, like, BANT is fabulous. And knowing what your sales process is, and how long it takes, and what the steps are, and what the momentum should be is great. But don't lose customers because you think they should have bought by now.
I think Mike and Chris both said it so well when they said that you're looking for the next step. If you're always moving someone to the next step, there's always, if you need to show it, there is movement, right? In activity, there's movement toward the close, but it's not pushing, right? Like, you can be suggesting, you can be providing energy, you can identify other triggers that might help them realize that they have some urgency. I used the example earlier of everybody being very cautious because it was such uncertain times, and now there's a 90-day window that if you know you need to buy something this year, it makes more sense to spend money earlier than later in the year. But there is a trigger now for a lot of people to go out and say, hey, with this is new information. Do you want to reconsider your timeline, right? Like, that's helpful. Bringing information, moving to the next step, that's a trigger. So constantly finding triggers and asking, does this apply? Like, those are things that I think are very helpful. And your Mike and Chris's example of what's the next step, right? What's the next step?
Mike, do you have one more thing? Chris, one more thing before we wrap up?
I always just go back to, it's about them. Like when you talk about creating urgency, I say customers buy on their timeline for their reasons. If they have a date in mind, if they have outside of legal or regulatory sort of things that are forced, you're not going to change what they need. All you can do is say, hey, if I need to get this done by the end of this calendar year, okay, well, how long does that ultimately take across things? And you work it with them and you show them, then we have to get this done by June 7th. Otherwise, you're not going to get it done. You draw that line in the sand and you tell them what the impact is, and then you can push towards it. But other than that, I don't think that you have any ability to influence their timeline or when they're going to sign. They're going to do it on their own. You just need to understand when.
The market can influence their timeline. So if you're
absolutely.
their market, right, that's when you can identify triggers.
Yeah, well, like you said earlier with the stuff going on with the 90-day pause on tariffs. Okay, if you were selling into that market right now, you should be, if you're in one of these things, if you're in a country that had huge amount of tariffs, you basically should be selling it almost like, hey, this is the discount that you're getting for right now.
Right. Or you have a true limited number of spots, like I do with a lot of like partnerships and sponsorships and things like that. There's only one presenting sponsor, two,
right.
Whatever. Like when that information changes, that's the market changing. You let your prospect know, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, there's one person in my life that creates urgency. She has a desk about 50 feet that way and that's what creates urgency for me. You can reveal urgency with the questions you ask, and you can reveal urgency as it relates to whatever the thing is. And sometimes people aren't aware of the things. They might not be aware of the timeline. They may not be able to say, hey, you know what? I've got an MBO that I've got a bonus that's based on us having this software implemented by the 1st of January. Well, okay. So that you're not going to be able to make that decision on December 31st and have things implemented, depending on what your definition of implementation is. So let's work through an implementation timeline, what needs to be in place in order to get there. That piece that Chris is talking about, work backward from design backward, then we can execute forward. We can understand where our risks are. And then when we get into these areas where we're getting too far inside or outside of our spectrum of risk, we can start to make informed decisions based on the criteria that we have in front of us. And what we might decide is there might be a better way to go about doing this, like getting a proof of concept implemented before the larger contract is signed and put in place. There's different ways that we can get creative if we understand things from the context of the person on the other side, which is another just reinforcing or parroting some of the things that have already been said. Know your customer, know your business, know your approach, go out there and execute. And when things aren't moving forward, if progress is not happening, then start asking yourself those questions. What's changed? What's different? What's most important? Why have things changed? Who has changed? I mean, sometimes you lose deals because of 14 words in a contract with Bank of America that is worth 7 figures. 14 little words that I could never get changed. And there was no way. It was outside of our spectrum of risk. We were not within our risk spectrum where we could accept those little words. Even though I said out loud many times, once that thing is signed, no one is actually going to open up that back then file cabinet where things were signed. Like no one's going to go in and look for this thing. So if you know the game you're playing, you'll get better at being able to play the game that you're playing.
Liz, you said earlier, you started us off with what are some hacks to close, and we laughed at that, but I actually want to offer up, both Chris and Mike gave a hack. And I say it's a hack. I hate the word hack, but I say that because so many people skip it. And that is a timeline, like a clear timeline, so that it helps people figure out when they need to make a decision to meet their goal. A clear timeline is skipped way too often. And you both gave the example of to the end, not to the purchase. Like timeline to purchase is one thing, but like to the end, right?
Right. That's right. That's really important. It has nothing to do with when do you want to buy this. It has to do with when do you want to be using this, to have this implemented, to have
when do you need this value to come into your organization?
Yeah. And the second one is related to all that is, what does onboarding or implementation look like? And a very clear path for that, because a lot of the things that slow things down are related to that timeline misunderstanding. And what does implementation or onboarding look like? And I'll say this from the B2B world, because Mike, you say you have one person, involved in your decision. But like, we've turned this into B2B now. All four of us are involved in this decision, and I might be purchasing, but Liz's department is the first one that has to adopt it, right? So that fuzziness and fogginess around what that looks like, I think slows things down tremendously. So if you really want an answer to what are the hacks, I would say 2 are timeline and implementation / adoption.
I think the other side of timeline is, when will you be ready to be able to implement this, or when will you be ready to execute?
All of it. Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes it's not we need it done by, but we can't start until.
My goal says I need it today, but Liz's department, who's in charge of the first step, can't do it until she finishes the big project she's on, right? Like, that's why those timelines and what does implementation, adoption, or onboarding look like, I think are they shouldn't be hacks. They should be SOP, but so many people skip them. I think you could call it that.
So we are at the top of the hour. Mike, did you have one more thing?
One more. Here's the way not to do it. If you act now, we'll give you this discount.
Oh, geez. And I had a client who every year at the end of the year, they drop their prices. And then they started saying, well, our clients, they just always wait till the end of the year to buy. Like, they wait till the end of the year because they know you'll drop your prices.
Buyers still are humans. They're still humans. Like, the humans are out there making these decisions. They can be conditioned and trained. And if you're conditioning and training them to do the things that you don't want them to do, go take a look in the mirror and do better.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for your input to the crew. And thanks for those of you who have been listening. We love having you here with us as we explore difficult and interesting sales concepts and problems. Again, thanks for joining us on the Sales SOS podcast, and we'll see you next month live and anytime you want on the various podcast channels. Have a great day, everybody, and happy selling.